We're going to be talking about controlling cost, balancing training and inference. And we got Pallavi, who also is joining us from California on screen. And hopefully I will see her at some point coming up. All right, so please give them a round of applause as well. There we are, we got Pallavi. Pallavi, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
Perfect, we can hear you too. We couldn't hear you in the first place. So we're all ready to talk about training and inference. So I'm going to ask a question first, because we probably need to define training and inference. So I've got a definition, but I'm not a tech guy. And we've got tech guys on the everywhere else. So anybody wants to be brave and give a definition in terms of the difference between training and inference? No, nobody's brave?
Are you
any of you? Joris, you want to go?
Okay, yeah.
Please, go ahead.
I can start. So basically when we have actually any model, so it doesn't need to be advanced AI, it can be some linear regression if you want. So first we need to, if we want to actually build model and actually get it, so get all the weights and the methodology, actually we need to train, we need to feed the data, and the training procedure will actually fine-tune the weights. And after the training, actually, we will have a model. Then basically inference is when we want to put model into the production, into the life, so that actually it predicts something. It works for us. It's actually doing the job. Now there are a lot of cost implications, of course. Then we can maybe talk later.
Yeah, you will do that. Anybody wants to add anything in terms of definition, or are we all happy? We'll kind of start on the same place. So training first, basically inference second, to make it very, very broad. I just want to double check whether Pallavi is still around, because she's disappeared on my screen.
I can hear you guys.
Okay, perfect. I can't see you, but you can hear us, so that's fine. Again, so...
And I just wanted to add to...
Please, do. Go ahead.
The whole definition of training and inferencing. I think we are also coming to a point where the boundary between training and inferencing is soon going to blur. DeepSeek kind of showed that to us. There's this concept of now test-based compute, which is traditionally what you've done is you've spent all the time training models. And then, there's this thing called inferencing, where you actually get insights from what the models have been trained, right? This is what you use for your applications. Now, the boundary between training and inferencing is actually getting diluted, because a lot of when you do inferencing, the models have started to reason, which is where with all the data that is coming in, the models are also training themselves and doing the inferencing. So the traditional definition and the traditional partitioning of training and inferencing is now getting diluted. So that's another point to just add.
Do you all agree with that in terms of that blurring of between the two concepts?
Yeah, I mean, definitely we can improve. So the training process can actually still continue after the model is also live, given the information that it gets from the user. So this is definitely what is done, maybe in big portion or in a very small portions, which is basically blurring the difference between them. Yeah, for sure.
Jack, Sinu, do you have anything maybe you want to add on that specifically?
Well, we're here to talk about cost. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, we're going to move into cost, absolutely. But just wanted, okay. I mean, we can move into cost. What are the different type of costs? And maybe more specifically, what is driving this cost? Is it, I mean, we talk a lot about during the day, the compute, the architecture, can be the data, the energy, the power. Is it any of those, any more of those? What do you do of you?
Well, you use the word cloud AI, right? Like it's up in the cloud. It really isn't in the cloud. It's in a data center somewhere, right? And in general, those are built in areas that have the proper infrastructure. In Las Vegas, I have a house in Las Vegas, so I know. They're putting in massive data centers there because they have fiber and they also have very good power. There's a lake there with a turbine on it, a dam and a turbine, so have constant power there. And I'll give you for instance, why it wouldn't, I'm from California, why it wouldn't be built there. And we pay 47 cents a kilowatt hour, 0.4 euros, 0.5 euros per kilowatt hour. Nevada is roughly 15 cents for industrial users per kilowatt hour. So, and we don't have consistent power in California. Power goes out sometimes. So you would put it in an area where your cost structure is low. And right before I came up here, I was looking at, I didn't know what the cost per kilowatt hour. Kilowatt is a unit, kilowatt hour is a unit of energy. It's a measure, it's a bucket of electrons that you throw onto the data center. The lowest in Europe is actually Turkey at 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, if I were going to build cloud-based AI, I would go look at Turkey. It's a reasonably economically successful country. I don't know about their fiber optic, the internet infrastructure, but that if you want a lower cost, it seems to me, looking at where you're going to build the data center and also construction costs. In the last round table, we were talking. There was a guy there. They're looking at building low cost AI, low cost data center, and that sounds like a win to me. And I suggested looking at Mexico. It's right next to California. In Mexico, the per capita GDP is about 14,000 US, and in the United States, it's $66,000 per capita GDP. So it's a much lower cost structure. And in Mexico, they build all the car parts for cars in the United States, just about everything. In fact, they build entire cars there. A lot of people don't know that. And during the 80s, when they started shipping car parts and stuff over there, there was a lot of skepticism about them being able to pull it off because it's a poor country, but they did. And the tires and wheels and doors and glass and things all made there and shipped across the border. We have a trade agreement with them, and then the final assembly is done there. So they definitely have it. If I were going to be competitive in the AI business, I would look at putting my data center somewhere outside the U.S. in a country that has a low cost structure. So that's my input on it. You asked me about back propagation and training and so forth like that. That is energy intensive. It is. Another thing I'll say is, like, I do these talks, and I worked in entertainment. I was actually a video game engineer. So the GPU that's in most consoles like PlayStation and PC-based gaming rig, Xbox, is essentially the same hardware that runs AI. They call it a tensor processor, but it's the same basic hardware. And it uses a field of mathematics called linear algebra. So they both are very similar. And that's a coincidence, kind of. And cost, I mean, if we didn't have video games, that put the demand on lowering costs of GPUs, really put pressure on them. NVIDIA wasn't the only company making those. A lot of them went out of business because they couldn't afford to create the silicon. And NVIDIA, of course, has an advantage with the connections to Taiwan. So, but video games put pressure, and in CAD put pressure to lower the cost of the hardware. And NVIDIA came out with their first GPU in '99, and that was fairly fast, fast enough, but couldn't run AI. They can't. It's not enough horsepower. It's only fairly recently that that's been capable to do. So cost, I maintain that CAD and video games put pressure on these people who are making GPU chips to get their costs down. Why has NVIDIA succeeded and been the most successful? I think their hiring is very good. They have really good engineering team there, of course. And also they have a good leadership. I won't take too much time, I could ramble on, but in 2000, I sold my business to Facebook a long time, not a long time, but 10 years ago. We were working with NVIDIA on this device, and NVIDIA was small. It was, you go on campus there, it was like, this is it. It's bigger than this room here, but still it's pretty small. But you look at it now, oh my Lord, it's an entire block on Central Avenue in Santa Clara. But anyways, back to my story. We tuned our headset there. And I'm not going to get into the technical part of it, but they were very welcoming of the technology. This is the other thing. They welcomed us in. My boss knows Jensen, and they let us in their lab to tune the headset and get it ready for production. And again, they were very small, but they knew they were primarily into gaming back then, selling GPUs for machines. That's why they welcomed us in, because they're looking for more business to come their way. So yeah, I think the lowering of costs of silicon and energy cost are the two main trajectories. Of course, the massive parallel systems, they have racks of GPUs, or racks of TPUs rather. That's also beneficial and lowers your costs too. So that's my speech.
Thank you, Jack. I mean, generally from your side, obviously you're more on a software perspective. So in terms of reducing costs, where are you going, and what do you see in terms of what you need to do from your side?
Thank you very much. I think we can just take a step back and look a bigger picture. So for the training AI is very important, or is a fundamental step. But for most of the enterprises, when they want to introduce AI into their system, is the ultimate purpose is to how to seamlessly to integrate AI's models capabilities with their business. So it is where Dify comes in. So based on Dify's platform, we, instead of training AIs, we can help the clients and enterprises to integrate AI's capabilities to their business streams and saving costs. And we can do this from I think there are two key features. The first one is the model agnostic. So Dify allows enterprises to choose different models, including the open source one, the third-party models, or the customized models. So we have a client which is a consumer goods company. They have been comparing the different performance of the different models when they started to putting it into production, and finally they found that there is a small model that is which performance is quite well. So they choose this small model, and which is saving them a lot of costs. And this is one. And another key feature, I think, help the clients to save cost is the RAG engine. So Dify has the RAG system, so allowing enterprises to upload their private data into these workflows, and the enterprise can use in the orchestration layer like workflows and to connect with their private data without fine-tuning. So this is also a kind of cost-saving way. One of our clients, which is a transportation management company, so they have been building their own big data system, which has been collecting many data every day from the sensors, from the weather stations, or from the road. And they previously want to build their own, fine-tune their own models, but later they compare to the RAG solution, and they find that they're pretty much the similar performance, but the RAG solution can cost like below the half. So finally they choose the RAG solution. Yeah, I think this is what we see, that enterprise to save the cost by using Dify. Yeah.
And from your perspective, Jurish, where do you see your companies cutting costs, and especially for yourself?
I mean, yes, in current company or in any previous, basically the cutting of the cost was actually all the time business. And here especially, I mean, this cost of running AI is actually quite complex. I mean, there is an energy perspective, of course, but for example, if you want to build data center, then you have all these construction things. And of course, then you can have cloud, meaning that you are not doing any initial investment, but you are much more flexible at that point. But then again, with cloud, you also need to be very of like any hidden cost or any expenditure and so on. So there are, like, apart from building the better hardware, which is actually steadily going on from NVIDIA, from other providers, there are also a lot of other ways. I mean, you can reduce the floating point precision of the model and weight calculation. Then of course it can come to very basic stuff like organizing yourself. So either with training, so that your experimentation data flows, and actually that you plan things ahead, that you make sure that you are not doing a big training and then realize that you made something wrong on the step 2, and then you need to repeat the process again, and you have double the cost, for example. A lot of those things are there, I mean, both on the training, which is more of an investment or the big process, and interference, which is like more of operational stuff. So you want to make sure that that you have the right model. So sometimes you don't need, let's say, very high levels cutting edge LLM for some use case, but can be more basic, or yeah, basically a lot of different stuff. For example, like previously said, that you said, okay, I will not fine tune, I will not train my LLM, but I will just use the RAG solution and basically put it together fairly quickly, so you save both time and both costs here. Yeah.
And kind of moving on to you, Pallavi, where do you see, I mean, from an Intel perspective in terms of controlling costs, but also I'm interested to hear in terms of your clients when they're trying to do the similar thing, because obviously you've got a lot of clients as a major provider. Where do you see the areas where they're trying to control cost as well?
I think, there's a lot of software innovation that's actually happening, and especially if you look at it from an inferencing point of view, because, it's frankly, it's just the frontier models that are actually getting trained, and a lot of workloads, what they need is inferencing. There was, like, somebody mentioned about quantization. There's this new technique which is called distillation. Think of it like, distillation is a teacher-student model where your teacher's model can be 671 billion parameters. I'm taking the example of DeepSeek. But you can have smaller student models, which could be 7 billion parameters. Now, what it does is it provides you 85% of the accuracy with almost 100th of the cost. So there are a lot of these innovative techniques that are now getting adopted. RAG, for example, that was also talked about, is something that we are seeing enterprises use a lot, especially when it comes to use cases like chatbot, summarization, Q&A, and all of that stuff. Because, you start with pre-trained models. You don't need to fine-tune. You can bring in your enterprise data. You're also not worried about security because your data stays within your perimeter. So again, I think I can keep on talking about a lot of innovation that's happening, whether we are talking of the mixture of expert architecture, multi-headed latent attention, all of that stuff. So we are seeing it's not just hardware innovation. We are also seeing a lot of software innovation that is actually helping bring down the cost of inferencing.
So hardware, software, energy, the big three. I think if you're a company, you're kind of looking at that and you're saying, okay, I know I need to do that, but it's not easy. So I guess a question for all of you, do you need to prioritize? Does it depend on your use case in terms of what you need to do? Is it really kind of almost on a case-by-case basis? Or do you I'm sure everybody wants to do everything at the same time, but people have to make decisions in terms of what they might do more than others. So from your perspective, what would be, I guess, the criteria or the thing you need to consider before going, okay, I need to focus much more on the hardware side of things. I need to focus much more on the software side of things. I need to focus much more on the agency side of things. What are the things that you think you would consider? Jack, do you want to start with you?
Sure. You brought up a very good point about precision, integer precision. So I'll just describe what I mean. In a computer, things are divided up into the data type. And let's say you have a data type which is 32 numbers long, okay? Why does AI need 32 numbers long? If you have the precision, you double the speed of execution and you use half the power. I haven't never thought about that before, but in computer games, that's what's done. The graphics are good enough. Does anyone notice the difference between double precision and single precision? No, nobody really notices it. And it runs faster. That's a very good point. I just don't know the answer to that. That's a good one. The other thing is, when enough companies jump into the AI business and offer services, why can't there be a way to get these companies to bid on your stuff? Like, I want to do this. Who's going to give me the best price? I don't know if that exists right now. I don't think it does. It sounds like a really good software application to be able to, you put your project in there and it comes back and quotes you from different sources what the training is. That's a really good point, I think. I don't know if that exists. I didn't do my homework on that, but yeah, just changing the architecture, the software a little bit, and you can perhaps get twice the performance out of it. It would run twice as fast. The execution time would be twice as fast, and the energy cost would be half. It's just sometimes people, they just don't try it, and because they're pressed for time or whatever, it's the bandwidth they have to do these kinds of tests. Incidentally, I don't know what your background in AI is, but there's some really, really good videos by StatQuest on YouTube. They're really good. And the guy explains very, very clearly how AI works, like backpropagation and training. If you don't want to learn the math is complicated. It's linear algebra. It's weird stuff. If you don't want to worry about math and you just want to get the basic idea of it, I would go there and check it out. That's just a recommendation I have. So thank you.
Thank you. Dinru, from your perspective, what would be kind of the first thing you would advise a company to start doing in terms of controlling their costs from your side?
From my side, I think it's pretty much based on what stage is the enterprise is in now. So we see that there are some companies, they just start to introduce GenAI's capability into their company, and they just they have a imagination that they want to buy chips, they want to have a lot of money to waste on the hardware, I say. But after they purchase a lot of things, there is a little bit performance of actual capabilities or the performance of the AIs to integrate into their business streamlines. So we see, so based on our observations, it's better to like having a software platform to building to solve some questions or solve some problems that is definitely can have some performance. And after that, you have been using workflows more and more. You will know that how much the hardwares you need to purchase or the cloud services. So after that, I think a company can have a better understanding of what the company's needs and to choose the hardware side. Yeah.
Joris, from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, definitely depends on which stage you are, because if you are at the beginning, you can plan differently. Or you can, for example, choose that, okay, I will just start, I will see how it goes, basically, and try something and not limit my imagination at the beginning. But when you are basically at some point when you maybe want to scale and so on, my belief is that it is basically the easiest to optimize from the top down. So easiest from the software layer if we want, because you have the most freedom there. If you, for example, if you built already the data center at some geography, it is kind of more difficult to actually just move to the other area. And even what for example we recently figured out, even if you are on cloud actually on some area, it is not so easy to move from one cloud or the other cloud, or from one even on the cloud in one region to another region. So definitely I would start with basically software organization of the things and so on. And yeah, I mean, when on cloud, of course, sometimes you can switch to another hardware or negotiate a better price or something like that. Yeah.
And Paravi, from your perspective, if you were to advise, one of your customer in terms of this is where you need to start focusing and controlling your costs first, what would you say? What would you look into? What would be the criteria you would consider to do that?
Yeah. So, Dexter, one of the things that I've seen is there are many examples where enterprises start with some proof of concepts. And, those use cases die as proof of concepts. They never see the light of the day. And I think, if you start with the use cases where you see the least path of resistance, and I'll give you an example. If I introduce AI into my software engineer's workflow, saying that, this is going to go about and replace software engineers, versus bringing in AI where I say that this is going to help take the tedious job out of it so that you can focus on the core pieces. You've just restated the problem statement in a very different way. So, working with some of the enterprises, one of the use case that we had, which saw the least path of resistance, was how we brought in AI-based automation to bring in worker safety. So, start with the use cases where you see the least human resistance and you see AI as something that is helping and bringing like a force of good. Those use cases are the ones that actually see the light of the day.
Thank you. I want to kind of open it up for questions. If there is anyone, are you all being shy again? I know, it's terrible. No, 1, 2, 3.
Can I have a question?
You can have a question, yes. If nobody on the floor.
Okay.
There's one on there. Please, microphone. Yes, for Anna, please. Just a lady at the front there, please. Thank you. And you have to wait for the mic so that Pallavi can hear the question. Just there. The lady there. Sorry.
Okay, I'm a master's university student, and I'm working on a thesis about AI regulations and their effects on startups, especially comparing Europe and US. My name is Neslim, and I'm wondering, is there a cost calculated putting the regulations effects on your business? So if you are a company or startup in Europe or US, does this cost, the regulations, GDPR, European AI Act, all these costs calculated in it? Do you know anything about it?
So I think the question is about, you've got regulations in many multiple jurisdictions, and in terms of, tell me if I'm wrong, but in terms of when you're calculating the cost and trying to control the cost, are you also thinking against the cost of regulation, as it were?
Yeah. Has it been calculated ever? So that's the question.
I don't know if it's been, if anybody knows whether it's been calculated ever, happy to answer, but I don't think it has been from my perspective, but I'm happy to be proved wrong.
Yeah.
But what, I guess...
Are you talking about government regulation? Like state regulation, or what kind of regulation?
For US, it is state regulations on AI, AI-specific regulations. For Europe, it changes.
I don't believe in the US we have anything like that yet, but they'll find a way to get money out of it, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm not yet aware that there would be like any transfer pricing or something like that, so that we would actually structure the cost or or for example know that this portion of the inference cost or something is actually part of the regulation, because it usually builds in the other way. And so you have, for example, compliance department in a company who would actually focus on the regulation. And then you have like technology and business, which will have focus on the other things. And usually this compliance cost is actually included in the whole operating cost of the company. This is why it is not so much, let's say, yet maybe reflected. At the end, it's sometimes even communication within the company is not so easy that even more obvious partition of the cost would actually see the light of the day. So this is more or less the answer. But there is also sometimes maybe a risk that, for example, sometimes compliance actually starts first before the use cases and everything in the company is regulated before people even start working on that. So this is kind of curious situation that can actually happen, and it can have an effect on the, let's say, transformation of the company.
It's also conceivable that a government or an entity would place a value-added tax on the use of the asset to generate revenue for the country. It's conceivable that would happen, or a tariff of some sort. That's why I would want to, if I was building infrastructure, like hardware infrastructure, I'd put it in a place with low taxes, for sure. There's places in the United States that have no state income tax. There's no income tax. In California, my taxes are 40%. And then if I add on property tax, $8,000 a month for property tax, you wouldn't want to put it there. Nevada has much lower taxes, and so you would put the place in, with no tax burden. That way, if a value-added tax came along from another entity, you could kind of handle it, But if it's in a high-tax state like New York or California, it would be burdensome. So I think the location of where you put the software infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, or hardware infrastructure is very important. And I just have one other point I wanted to bring up. I mentioned this last night. It's a question for the audience. What's the most environmentally friendly source of energy? What is it? I teach energy at Berkeley. Any ideas? The most environmentally friendly? No, it's not. It's coal. It's coal.
Cool.
The cost to process it, when you drill the oil out of the ground, you put it in a ship, and you go across the ocean and you process it in a refinery, the energy input is very high. But with coal, you dig it out of the ground and throw it in a boxcar, in a rail car, and they put some stuff on it, and it also depends upon the type of coal, but it's very, very environmentally friendly. The problem is when you combust it, there's secondary things that happen, sulfur dioxide, but you can scrub that out. You can get rid of that.
Minor things.
What I'm saying is that if you're in a coal-rich country, you've got low energy cost, and you might want to look at it, putting an asset like that into a country like China, has no coal-rich country.
Maybe. Gentleman there.
Yes, to you. My name is Morten Ergens. I'm from the AI organization Cairn now. So yes, there's several. I don't know if this is what you were intending when you were asked, but there are a lot of there's several estimates of the economic impact on companies in Europe from the AI Act. And these estimates have been driving the re-evaluation that the Commission is doing on moving towards simplifications of various acts. There are so many acts that are impacting actually the question here. But because there are several percentage points here, and that has been a driving cause for looking into the changes that the current administration now is trying to drive. And there are considerable levels to that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, as with anything with the European regulation, it depends how it is enforced, and that can change multiple times. But maybe, I know, a quick question on that maybe for you, Pallavi. Obviously, you're a global business, and you have to kind of comply with all those different rules. I mean, does that apply in terms of your cost factor, or is it kind of a completely different area, more in terms of the compliance side of things? Or do you kind of deal with all those different rules? Because obviously you're a global business and you'll be in multiple jurisdictions.
See, when it comes to compliance, I look at it from 2 points of view. One is the data compliance. This is where GDPR and all of those restrictions come in. So, which means that your data has to stay within a required perimeter, which means that you only have certain data centers that you can actually go about, certain geographies where you can have your data center. The second kind of compliance that comes in is more in terms of trade restrictions. The US government has now imposed certain trade restrictions of, what's the wattage and what's the compute power of the chips that you can actually sell to People's Republic of China and few other countries. So which means that right now they have to be on a generation -1 as compared to what the rest of the world is at. So when I look at compliance, those are the two different things. And as Intel, as we develop AI chips, we make sure that while our hardware remains the same, there are certain restrictions that we put in as we ship it to different geographies.
Thank you. Yurish, you had a question.
I had the question. I got that thought that okay, the advice would be to start small with the achievable proofs of concept, low hanging fruits, and so on. I mean, I had recently actually a quite substantial discussion whether like this would be, let's say, a good strategy, or maybe just a pragmatic one, or is it maybe better to think about like some foundation, some platform, something to build, and then basically make sure that future proof of concept or cases actually can be deployed and developed faster, actually with less costs, with less time, and so on. So this is maybe what my thought of basically you all three or four. What do you think between like building a solid platform or just going for it in a like greedy algorithm way? Just let's find a few most achievable cases at this point.
I mean, in general, when we discuss, you talk about what you have in terms of, I think you called it dynamic agentic workflows in terms of you moving up. So maybe from that perspective, in terms of answering kind of Yuri's question, what exactly do you do in terms of kind of helping out and kind of developing and kind of innovating within that sphere?
So we see that I think this is very good questions, because I think these two patterns has been apparent in our different clients. Some of the clients just using Dify, because Dify is an open source platform. They can use the open source one and freely to do some agentic workflows and to solve their problems. And some companies just choose to purchase a enterprise version, and they just want to do a whole picture one. But I think based on our observations, the first one, it can usually work longer, because usually in the latter ones, because there is usually nobody which is very know AI know AI boundary well, know business well, and know how to integrate those everything well, and having a whole picture. There is difficult to find such people to lead such a problem, to lead such a project. So we usually see that if you start small, but you can just build in some workflows to solve problems, and step by step there will be more and more workflows. And currently we see some clients who have been building over 10,000 workflows on Dify's platform. It's very amazing. So they are just starting from very limited workflows. So we see this is a quite useful approach, from our observation.
Okay.
Anybody else? Pallavi, do you have any view in terms of what you can help based on Yuri's question?
Yeah, no, I just, I agree with what was being said. Typically, what we see our customers do is they start with few of the workflows, and then they go about and start looking at adopting a platform that helps commonalize, a lot of these workflows together. And by that time, you've also gotten an early estimate of what is the return of investment you're bringing in with bringing AI into your workflows. And that then leads into a better investment from a platform point of view.
Jack, do you have any view in terms of where we could go? Or I can go to my final question. It's up to you.
Go to your final question.
So, okay, fine. Anybody else in the room has any question? Yes, gentleman over there.
This may be an obvious or stupid question, but it's just occurred to me, given that we've been focusing on different types of costs, etc., noting the input on different models, different cloud setups, private, mixed, etc. But from a business value perspective, I have a question mark regarding. It's a little bit harder to measure the business value when you're focusing on humanistic sort of benefits, because you're evaluating outcomes or outputs, and more output, more productivity. That's a little more difficult rather than hard savings. But one of the things that just occurred to me, and it's just maybe it's obvious, but when choosing a POC, and POCs will be successful and scalable from a cost perspective, one of the obvious things that hits me is that your use case is dependent on the data you're going to feed into the data model. If your use case has poor quality data, you're stuffed. There's no point in even going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just going to blow a whole lot of money on something that's going to deliver no value, right?
Let's start with Pallavi, and then I'll bring it back to the room. Pallavi, do you have a few thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you need to make sure that you have the right data. And whether it's data these days, a lot of use cases are visual image based use cases, but you need to make sure that even in that case, the images that you're getting in, they're good resolution. You don't have bad day lighting and all of that stuff. So if you do not have the right data, you'll not actually get the right outcome from the use cases that you want to bring AI into.
Yours? Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I totally agree. It's kind of classic of this garbage in, garbage out thing. So we all know that basically if there is not enough data, usually it's that problem. Maybe the data is not cleaned, but unfortunately, there are also a ton of other risks that you can have here that basically makes your investment in the model invaluable. You can have a poor a collection of the business requirements, so poor communication between what needs to do and what actually the data science team actually does at the end. You can have basically poor skills in the data science team. They will think that, yeah, let's just throw the data in the algorithm and then run it for 3 months and we will get a super duper model. And maybe at the end, they will not even be aware that the model is poor. So there are like a ton of, or in deployment, something can go wrong, or somebody forgets to do some test, or I don't know, something else happened. There are a lot of risks, but this data one is actually one of the most,
Yeah, I fully agree with that because we see many enterprises, they want to integrate their data with our platforms, but we see that the performance is quite different because their quality of the data, whether the data is structured or not. The company I mentioned that they have been building 10K workflows. The previous step one work is to that they have a 150 person their team, large team, to collect those data and to make those data to make more structured. They collect data from the whole enterprise. So the public data of the enterprise is only about 10%, but more data is in the WhatsApp or in emails, things like that. They are doing this job for 6 months to sort out those data, and then using those data to do the workflows, and they have been achievements. Yeah.
Final question, quick answers. You ready? Actually, I need to find my final question, what my final question is. Now, I think my final question is going to be, if you look towards the future, in the short-term future, let's not go 2050 and start going crazy. Where do you think we're going? What do you think is going to be the big thing in terms of we need to think about in terms of those costs in training and inference, and maybe something else coming up? So from your perspective, what is the one thing in 1 or 2 years? Maybe Jack, you want to start with that?
Well, it pertains to the question of the person there in the front row, and targeting propaganda towards groups of people. I noticed that on Facebook. I used to work there, so I can criticize them. I look at a reel on Facebook. A reel is a little clip, video clip, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm getting targeted with the same kind of stuff. And most of it's negative. I look at one negative thing, all of a sudden, my psyche's being bombarded with negativity. Or ads for stuff I just glance at. I don't know, beer or whatever it is. They don't have beer on there, but as an example, tires or whatever. There has to be some regulation, and I don't know how you would do that to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. Or should be able to choose that I don't want that. I'm not a fan of Google for some reasons, but they're the worst at doing this kind of stuff. And there has to be some sort of protection for the public, targeting with political messaging and so forth, that's created entirely fictional stuff. I think that there's a necessary regulatory component to that it's not really being thought out back in the States. And it's fearful. Also, some of the art that's generated by AI is horrific, hellish stuff, scary looking. So, yeah, I think there has to be. Now, the dangerous part of that is that the government is then choosing what the people can see because they don't like what's being put out there. And so that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, in Europe, we've got a Digital Services Act, which is kind of the idea behind it. But you're right, because one of the definition is legal but harmful. And then, could the government decide that in terms of free speech, that's the right way to go? Any from you two on the stage, any kind of thing? I mean, you don't have to go political if you don't want to. But in terms of where we're going in the next
I will not.
5 years.
I will not. I saw, let's say, a big competition on how far we can go, actually, just to see if we can go to the other side of the tunnel. Now I think we have the kind of a more second stage, because I think we might be hitting some limits, actually, in the terms of data and the cost of the training more powerful models, let me put it like that. Now we will streamline and optimize the process in any way, with hardware, with software, with maybe energy, with anything that we mentioned here. But this would be the focus now, how to squeeze the most of the training process, I think, and inference as well later. But this would be probably the focus, in my opinion, in the next 1, 2, 3 years.
Okay, Jinru, from your perspective, what do you see happening as a main thing going forward?
I pretty agree. It's like squeezing every spaces, and I based on our observations, I think the speed will be. I think the speed is very fast, and the people between people and data and like workflows, models, they will just connect more and more closer, and the spaces has been squeezed out, and these elements will be connect more and more closer. Yeah.
Pallavi, final words to you. What do you think is a short-term future?
We have to make AI most cost effective. And today, if you look into it, there's a vendor lock-in. There are some leading vendors who start right from the hardware to, there's a There's a jail of the software ecosystem that they build on top of it. So there's a need to bring in a lot of open source. Traditionally, open source is thought of only from a software point of view. But I know that, the Open Compute Platform, OCP, is now looking into chiplets. A lot of that innovation where you kind of, make things open so that, there are other vendors that can also come in. And it's not just compute. If you look into it, when you set up a data center, there's a lot of investment that comes in from compute, from memory, from networking, all of that stuff. So opening up those interfaces, bringing in more vendors to come in and taking away the lock-in, to me, that is what is going to bring the cost down.
And I think they're very, very, very interesting final words to end the discussion. So I want to thank my three panelists here on stage, and obviously Panali. Sorry, I know I would mess it up at some point, and it had to be Pallavi back in the West Coast, I believe. Thank you very much to all of you, and thank you very much to the audience there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.